its solar maximum, which is a period of time where it's most active, meaning this eclipse is perfectly timed for you to have the chance of seeing some insane flares, some stars in the middle of the day, the air will suddenly get cooler, and the reason you may never experience it again is that a lot of the time the shadow of a total solar eclipse passes through the ocean, the tip of South America, the coast of Iceland, so for a city to find itself in this path of totality again, you'll have to wait another 375 years. Now if you don't live in these cities, almost everyone in North America will still get the chance to see a partial solar eclipse, so be sure to make an update the day before to remind you that
this is the scary story about the Easter Bunny. One night, a kid named Jimmy was lying in bed. It was Easter the next day, and Jimmy couldn't wait. Suddenly, as Jimmy was trying to fall back asleep, he heard a noise come from downstairs. At first, he didn't care, but when he heard the noise again, he got up and went down the stairs to go check it out. Jimmy was really hoping that it was the Easter Bunny. When Jimmy got downstairs, he saw the Easter Bunny just standing there. Jimmy excited and tried to talk to him, but before Jimmy could even speak, the Easter Bunny jumped at him. The next morning, Jimmy's parents got up and went downstairs. In the living room, to look at the Easter baskets, they froze in horror. One basket was Jimmy's decapitated head. Jimmy's parents then freaked out and called the police. The police told them that a man was dressed the Easter Bunny last night and was breaking into people's houses and killing them.
I'm gonna show you a picture and tell me how it makes you feel. Extremely dark this photo, one that you probably wouldn't suspect. This was way out in Jefferson County, Georgia. This is back in 2017, and there was a lot of suspicious activity coming out of this area. This was April of that year, kind of near Easter time, so of course families had a plan on despite there being pockets in this area. So very late one evening, the girl where this story came from was home with her family, her two older brothers. It appears that she must have heard something outside of her room because she got to bed. Because there was a smashed dish that was found at the scene, we can assume that was what she heard. So she left her room and immediately started filming, thinking that it was probably her older brother. So she was trying to make a joke. Only when she left her room, it was not her brother in the kitchen. No one seemed to hear anything, but she was found the following morning in the backyard of the home, and this was one of the final frames that was captured on her phone that was released publicly.
A man walking down the street eating a severed leg. On March 26th of this year, around 8 a.m. in Kern County, California, there was a fatal train collision that had killed Buddy. This collision happened at the city's Amtrak station. 27-year-old Rosendo Tellez was near the scene and actually went up to the victim and snatched his leg. He then started to walk around the area carrying that victim's leg. People in the area saw what he was carrying, and that's when they decided to record him. That's when they realized that Rosendo was walking around biting from that leg and eating it. The video was then posted on social media, and it showed him walking around with the leg, and then he started waving it around police cars that were near the area. That same day, Rosendo was arrested. He was charged with removal of human remains other than a cemetery, 1 misdemeanor count of controlled substance paraphernalia, and 1 felony offense of his probation. May that victim forever rest in peace.
The most evil kids ever. Part 3. Here is India's youngest serial killer ever, Amarjeet Sada. This young Indian boy was accused of murdering 3 babies. The young boy's first 2 murders were done to his family members. Amarjeet murdered his 6-month-old cousin and his 8-month-old sister. He would throw a brick at the baby's head to make them unconscious and then strangle them to death. The worst part was Amarjeet's family knew what was happening, they just did not care. Days later, the young boy went to his neighbors and abducted the newborn baby from them. He then killed his neighbor's baby using the same torture method. Amarjeet was caught committing the crimes. When the police asked the little boy why he committed the crimes, he just laughed and asked for a biscuit. Amarjeet was sentenced to 10 years in prison. This is him now, a free man.
Childhood actors who became murderers. Meet Ryan Grantham. Ryan Grantham starred in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movie and Riverdale. But on March 31st of 2020, his life took a dark turn. He unalived his mother while she was playing the piano and was sentenced to life in prison. His reason behind doing this was because he wanted to spare her from seeing the violence that he was going to commit later on.
I hope y'all live your life well without seeing my child, Gabrielle Blair. You lived well without seeing them throughout their whole life, so live well now. But you ain't got nothing to say to me for what I did for my child, period.
As a mother, one of your primary responsibilities was to protect your kids. And in that respect, you failed in the worst possible way. There's nothing that can be done at this point to change what happened.
True, that's why I'm asking for life.
They lived in terrible fear. And I find that just so sad these days. You imposed the death penalty on your own children.
I did.
You're therefore sentenced to the Michigan Department of Corrections for the rest of your life without possibility of parole, meaning that you will never get out. You will You will receive credit for 115 days.
On February 15, 2018, the defendant, Pearl Cynthia Fernandez, entered a plea to murder in the first degree and further admitted the essential circumstance of intentional murder by torture. Accordingly, it is the judgment and sentence of this court that the defendant shall be sentenced to a term of life in prison without the possibility of parole for the underlying murder charge.
I'm sorry to my children, and I want them to know that I love them. And I hope one day they will forgive me. I hope one day they would come to me. I wish I could have saved Gabriel.
The story of the School of Rock pedophile is one of the most disturbing things I've ever read about. Meet Jason James Murphy, a former Hollywood casting agent who, before he worked as a casting agent for children, had been convicted of one of the most terrible crimes I've read about. So when Jason was just 19 years old, he was in college at the time, he kidnapped an 8-year-old boy, held him hostage, and repeatedly assaulted him. He had met the boy while he was working as a camp counselor, and he eventually served 5 years in prison and was obviously required to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. But in 2005, just a few years after Jason got out of prison, he moved to California, and that's when he started working in Hollywood. Jason was a casting agent for a number of huge films. He worked by helping to cast the children in the film School of Rock. He also helped to cast the film Cheaper by the Dozen, which obviously has a lot of kids in it. And he worked on a number of different movies, including stuff like Super 8 by J.J. Abrams. Now, apparently, people didn't really know about his past, which I think is really strange, because if they were actually doing background checks on the people that they hired, they would see that this man had served 5 years in prison. But in 2011, he was rearrested for failing to file a name change. Now, he was arrested again in 2011 after he had worked on all these movies because he failed to file a name change and a change of address with the government, but he had apparently been working for years under a different name. And I mean, this guy was trying to outrun his sordid past, but with such a horrible crime that you've committed, you can never outrun that. And I don't know if he's still working with Hollywood, working around kids, but I really hope that he's not.
Find out years later will haunt you. A young couple decided to take a late-night stroll through the forest, but little did they know what awaited them. As they walked, the man felt a sense of unease, but his girlfriend dismissed his concerns. Suddenly, the man stepped on something that felt alive and squishy under his feet. Before he could react, they heard rustling from the bushes beside them. They ignored it and kept walking until they returned home. Years later, and they were watching TV when an interview with a death row inmate caught their attention. The man had been asked if he had ever came close to getting caught for his heinous crime. The killer responded with a chilling tale. Yes, I remember one night in the woods, a couple walked right by me. The man stepped on the body of the girl who I had just killed. I was hiding in the bushes just a few feet away, but they never saw me. The couple watched in horror as the name of one of the most notorious serial killers was revealed. His name was Ted Bundy. Follow because my next story is crazy.
You wanted to know more about Cherie Glenn, and I found you more. Now, this was the leaked booking photo of Cherie Glenn, one of America's most infamous cannibals from the 80s. So much of her story in these case records had been sealed from the public because it was deemed too disturbing to print. Even this booking photo, it was sealed. This is a leak. They did have somebody submit another leaked photo of this photo. It's just from a closer angle. Like I said, there's not really much that's publicly known because so much of her case was actually sealed. Rumors of the story is that the case was so bizarre and so horrific in the cannibalistic practices that it was difficult at the time to find a jury that could stand it. Descriptions of not only her consuming victims, but forcing victims to consume parts of her. Somebody also reached out and tracked down what they think might be a yearbook photo of her from the 70s. By no means is it 100% confirmed, but it does look really similar to her. It's 100% in the eyes.
This has to be one of the scariest videos I've ever seen. No ghosts, no spirits, real life. A young female real estate photographer was taking photos for her job one day. She happened to be in an occupied house. A resident began following her around. She says this wasn't unusual, so she didn't think anything of it, until she started noticing multiple locks on certain doors, and even a camera pointed toward one of these doors. When she goes upstairs, a man comes out of one of the rooms. What happens next is straight out of a horror film. You have to see the video for yourself.
Okay, so I took pictures of this house, and this guy was following me around like the whole time, which isn't unusual, but he was a little bit strange, and there was like 6 people living in this house, and it's a hoarder house. But I also noticed they have like 3 locks on the door, and then down here they have locks. And then going up here, they have a camera, and it's facing this door. Anyway, a roommate comes out of this door, and he asks them if he should lock the door and kidnap me. And I said, immediately, people know where I am. And then he laughed and said, no one would ever hear from you again. Bro, I did not even finish this house. I immediately left. I was like, nope, dipped the f*** out. You can see me right there. Hello. But yeah, pretty sure I maybe almost got kidnapped, but I don't really know.
If you're a woman and you've ever had any close calls like this, let me know in the comments below. We need to spread awareness that things like this really happen.
Yo, tell me you didn't delete the video of the dead kid. It's $10K if you give to the popo. That's one of the texts accused killer Taylor Sherman received after he and his friends, known as the Gilbert Goons Gang, allegedly beat 16-year-old Preston Lord to death. After the incident, the FBI was offering a $10,000 reward for more information. In another message, accused killer Jacob Meisner asked people to delete the videos to cover their tracks. All 7 suspects have pleaded not guilty.
I paused and he said, and I said, I've been wanting to do this for a long time, or something. And then I continued, I cut open his belly to see his guts. They're really pink. Sorry, that was morbid. It's okay if I do a demonstration. Oh yeah. This is him. I was strapped on top of him like this. Okay. And he couldn't fight back. It was actually surprisingly easy. I was barely breaking the sweat. I thought, oh, this guy, he's going to be tough. But no, it was actually surprisingly easy.
Hi, I'm Cam, and you might recognize this man as the former spokesperson for Subway. But today, he's eating cold prison meals and getting beat up by other inmates because Jared Fogle is a pedophile. Jared rose to fame when someone wrote an article about him in a student newsletter about his weight loss journey. Jared dropped 245 pounds and claimed it was from eating Subway. He did over 300 advertisements for Subway from 2000 to 2015. In 2004, Jared created the Jared Foundation, a nonprofit raising awareness about childhood obesity. The nonprofit didn't distribute any grants or funds like it promised, and the director, Russell Taylor, was arrested for child exploitation and possession of child porn. Jared came under the spotlight of the FBI when a radio host brought text messages and audio recordings of Jared claiming he was having sex with underage girls. He also asked the radio host to install cameras in her children's room so he could watch them. But the FBI apparently needed more evidence than that and didn't charge him. The FBI actually raided his house and Jared Vogel was charged. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In March of 2016, Jared was attacked by another inmate and was left with a bloody nose and swollen face.
Really did lose 245 pounds eating Subway sandwiches. And that's like a whole person and a half. I feel like I could do anything.
This couple were eaten alive by a grizzly bear, captured on harrowing video footage. It was October 2003. Timothy Treadwell was a 46-year-old grizzly bear enthusiast. He famously claimed that he felt more at home in nature with the bears than in normal human society. He spent a total of 13 summers in Alaska's Katmai National Park, documenting the giant creatures. He would stun people by how close he got to the giant animals. He said the animals understood him and that there was a mutual respect, and he would even occasionally wrestle with the baby cubs. Park rangers, though, were warning Timothy about how unpredictable the animals could be. This was what Timothy lived for, though. He seemed very willing to take the huge risk of getting up close and personal with these beautiful bears. Now, Timothy began to get complacent. On one occasion, he even left food open inside of his tent. Rangers had to warn him not to do this. Now, in the autumn in question, he was actually with his girlfriend Amy at the park. Now, they usually only stayed for the summer, but this year they were there much later into October. Bears are known to be a little bit more anxious and antagonistic this time of year as they are preparing for hibernation and food supplies are less. On the 5th of October, Timothy and his girlfriend were picked up. They were getting a plane out of the national park, but when the pilot turned up, they were nowhere to be found. Near the campsite, the pilot stumbled upon something terrifying. A human rib cage lay on the floor. Park rangers were called and they were met by a terrifying bear. It tried to attack them, so they killed it. Human remains were later found in its stomach. They were the remains of Timothy and Amy. Timothy's video camera was later recovered from the campsite. The camera had captured the couple's brutal death. The audio from the camera was rolling and it picked up Timothy screaming that he was being killed out here. Amy then shouts at him to play dead and then encourages him to fight back. Tragically, they were both eaten by the grizzly bear.
Did you get the ropes on you? Who did them? You're not in trouble with me, okay? We're just trying to figure out what's going on. Our main focus right now is you, okay? Who put the ropes on you? Supposed to help you what?
Imagine being invited over for a study session only to be murdered and eaten by another student. This man literally killed and ate a human and never spent any time in jail. It was the 11th of June 1981 in Paris. Isai Sagawa was a Japanese man studying in France. On the day in question, he invited a fellow student round to help him translate poetry for an assignment. The student was Dutch woman Renee Hartveld. She had no idea he had sinister plans for her. She also wasn't aware of his dark and depraved past. He planned to kill and eat her, and his reasoning was that he felt that he was weak and ugly. She, on the other hand, was very healthy and beautiful. He thought if he ate her, he would take on her characteristics. When she showed up, he shot her in the neck. Horrifically, he then arred her body and tried to eat her, but realized his teeth weren't sharp enough. He decided to go out and come back with a sharp knife. Upon arrival back at the house, he ate part of her face, bum, feet and neck. He then saved some of her body parts in his fridge. Now as time went on, the rest of her body started to decompose. He panicked and took the rest of her remains over to a lake. Luckily, he was caught doing so and was found to have 2 suitcases with him filled with body parts. Now this should have been the end of the tale, and he should have gone to prison and served a lot of time for this hideous crime. It turned out, as a child, he'd experienced cannibalistic desires. When he was 24, he'd stalked a woman and followed her back to her apartment. He then broke in as she slept. Now she actually woke up and fought back. He was arrested and charged with R, but actually had a wealthy dad who just paid off the victim. A few years later, in 1977, he went to study in Paris. He claimed he would often bring home S-workers and intend to kill them, but just would freeze up. Now again, due to his wealthy family, when he got arrested for the horrific cannibal murder, he was able to afford a good lawyer. He was found legally insane and unfit to stand trial. He was then placed in a mental hospital for an unspecified amount of time. However, his case then started getting widespread media attention, and he was actually deported back to Japan. It was in Japan he was declared sane. Now, the charges in France had been dropped, and he was released from hospital in 1986, and then was a free man. This was obviously heavily criticised by so many people. Staggeringly, he remained free until 2022, when he passed away from pneumonia in Tokyo, aged 73.
This is Funky Town, one of the worst cartel execution videos explained. Okay, before I begin, this is a massive trigger warning. The video begins in some sort of room and there is music playing. The first song that plays is Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses, and the camera pans to the victim tied on the floor with some plastic wire, but the torture already began before the video starts, because the victim looks like he already went through complete brutality. His hands have already been cut off and his face has been completely flayed, which means skinned. There is no skin on the victim's face at all, and his eyes have been gouged out, and there is an insane amount of blood on the floor. But the most messed up part about this is that the victim is hooked up to some sort of IV, and the IV is pumping him with drugs to keep him alive and aware, making sure he felt everything happening to him. At the start of the video, they try and slit his throat with a sickle and press it against his jaw. But when the victim begins to scream, they shove a box cutter in his mouth to shut him up. His screams are absolutely gut-turning. They kept going from screaming to gurgling, from screaming to gurgling. And as the video progresses, they take the box cutter and slit his throat about 40 times. And keep in mind, the victim is still alive and aware of everything because of the drugs they are giving him to keep him alive. Also, the killers are mocking and laughing at the victim the entire time. They continue to try and slit his throat with the box cutter and were going at his neck numerous times, all while the song Funky Town was playing in the background, hence the name of the video. The killers kept having to physically restrain the victim, meaning there was still a lot of life left in him, and the amount of pain he had to be in is completely unimaginable. At one point in the video, a man had his foot on his chest, holding him down, and another time they had shoved a pole in his mouth, holding him in place. But the worst part about the video is towards the end, where the victim manages to loosen his arms from the restraints and immediately tries to touch his face. But remember, the victim has no face at all, no hands, and no eyes. But instinctively, the victim still tries to touch his face. It's absolutely horrifying, and the video then concludes. Keep in mind, the victim was still alive when the video ended, so who knows what else they did to him before he died. Because they were literally keeping him alive just to torture him. This victim went through so much pain and torment, and could make an argument that nobody has ever been tortured as bad as this guy ever. I explain this based off pure memory from the first time I saw the video, because I won't dare watch it again because it's that gruesome. Everybody who saw videos like this always say Funky Town is the worst of worst. And I honestly think that might be true, so please don't watch it and please don't search it up.
In that video, you just saw a 17-year-old boy catch a 2-year-old girl after she plummeted from an open window. The 17-year-old's name was Fuzi Zabat, and this happened in 2019 in Istanbul. On that day, Fuzi was just walking down the street and he noticed that a young girl was playing near an open window of the family's apartment. He decided to stick around at the base of the window, and that's when the absolutely unthinkable happened. 2-year-old Syrian toddler Doha Muhammad actually flew out of the window. But thankfully, Fuzi was right there and he actually was able to catch her before she hit the ground. Now obviously, this young man has been credited with saving this girl's life. I mean, the video is frightening and terrifying, but at the end of the day, there's a good story behind it. After all this happened, that video went absolutely viral, and Fuzi was hailed as a hero across the world. It's just absolutely wild to me to think about that he was there at that exact moment that he was needed, and he was actually able to save this little girl's life through his extremely heroic actions that day.
is it possible for two people to vanish into thin air? On the night of February 25th, just last month, best friends and business partners Jason Salter and Kenny Guerra went to meet up in East Point, Georgia. They haven't been seen since. The two men were reported missing the next day after they completely stopped answering phone calls at around 4:30 the day prior and after failing to return home to their families. During the search for the men, authorities found Jason's Nissan Altima near Campbellton Road Southwest in Atlanta. In a completely different location, they found Kenny's BMW at the Reserve at Birch Creek apartment complex. After running the tags on Jason's car, police discovered that traffic cameras captured it at around 6:48 p.m. on the day they disappeared on Campbellton Road Southwest, but it's unclear who was actually driving the car. Both of their cell phones have also since been found, and authorities are trying to piece together a timeline and track their last movements. Jason and Kenny are known as true best friends, and they also own a print shop together in South Fulton County. Kenny's son has since celebrated a birthday without him, and according to his family, Kenny would not miss that for the world. If you have any information on the disappearance of these two men, please contact the East Point Police Department at 404-761-2177.
A man woke up during his own autopsy. This case is truly like something from a horror film. It was 2007 in Caracas, Venezuela. Carlos Camacho was 33 years old. He'd actually unfortunately been involved in a really bad car accident. Now, in the horror crash, he was mistakenly identified as being deceased. He was declared dead and taken to a local mortuary. They had no idea that he was actually very much alive, just unconscious. Carlos described feeling a horrific pain. As he woke up, a medical examiner was actually inserting a knife into him as part of his autopsy. As they sliced into his face, they realized something was terribly wrong because he started bleeding. Now, deceased people don't usually bleed because after around 6 hours, the blood starts to set in the body. They feared something had gone wrong and started to stitch him back up. Meanwhile, his heartbroken wife had been told that he'd passed away and was heading over to the mortuary to actually identify him. Imagine her shock when she saw him not deceased, but just wandering around the corridors. Carlos described the pain that he experienced during his autopsy as unbearable.
This man was chewing gum when it suddenly exploded, killing him. In December 2009, Vladimir, a 25-year-old chemistry student of Kyiv Polytechnic Institute, was killed when his chewing gum exploded in his mouth. Vladimir had a peculiar habit of dipping his chewing gum in citric acid to enhance its sour taste. On his work table, authorities found about 100 grams of unidentified explosive powder, which he used for his chemistry studies at home. This powder, however, was found to be 4 times stronger than TNT. It is believed that Vladimir accidentally confused the explosive powder with citric acid and coated his gum with it before putting it in his mouth and chewing it. The explosion was possibly triggered by the reaction of the explosive powder with Vladimir's saliva, or the pressure exerted by him chewing on the gum and explosive powder. The explosion resulted in a severe injury that blew out Vladimir's jaw completely. And despite immediate attention from emergency services, they were unable to save him. This is absolutely insane, and just imagine putting a piece of gum in your mouth, and then seconds later your head literally explodes from it. This is one of the most random and brutal deaths I've ever covered, and a very rest in peace. This is absolutely awful, and what are the odds of this?
The Egyptian woman that you just saw in that video, Manar Sami, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for the content she posted on TikTok. But what exactly was she posting on TikTok that got her sent to prison? Well, nothing out of the ordinary. Dancing, lip-syncing, and basic innocuous content. But she was arrested in 2020 on charges of, I'm going to read this to you, inciting debauchery, immorality, and stirring up instincts. Yes, she was arrested for immorality and inciting debauchery with her dancing TikTok videos. Well, Manar, like I said, was eventually sentenced to 3 years in prison. This happened back in 2020 when a number of Egyptian female TikTok influencers were randomly targeted and sentenced to prison time. After being found guilty, she was also ordered to pay 300,000 Egyptian pounds to the government. She did eventually get out of prison though, and she's still active here on TikTok, and over on Instagram too. I just couldn't believe it when I saw that video and saw that content like that got her sentenced to 3 years in prison It's pretty wild to me.
These kids found a nuclear fallout shelter underneath the city of Chicago. So we all know what a nuclear fallout shelter is. And their sole purpose is to protect you from a nuclear war. Or just a nuclear bomb. But the video I'm about to show you shows a group of friends finding a nuclear shelter under Chicago, and it's literally an entire city. It's got a bank, hospital, gym, and everything. And just wait to see how clean it looks. This means that somebody goes down there consistently and cleans it. Meaning, is something going to happen soon?
Mandela effects, they're pretty popular and shit. Let me know if you guys are surprised. You obviously know Toy Story, right? The famous lines that Woody says.
There's a snake on my boot.
A lot of people remember it as that as well. There's a snake in my boot, but the whole time is there's a snake in my boots.
This one it was always there's a snake in my boot.
Which it doesn't make sense is why it would be boots.
Yeah, this is us. There's snakes in my boots. What?
Yup.
Maybe I was just legit and I
No,
never
bro.
noticed it.
No, bro. It's not that. Cause look at the title.
I didn't know about that one.
Now this one, right? You know, in school they teach us about geography and shit, mountains and rivers, right? Do you remember getting taught what is the longest river in the United States?
Is it the Mississippi River?
So a lot of people
What? No.
remember it as the Mississippi River. This whole time, it's the fucking Missouri River. What the fuck is even the Missouri River?
I've never heard about the Missouri
I have
River.
never heard about the Missouri River either.
Was I that much of a dumbass?
Let's search this up real quick, bro. What?
They're literally the same fucking thing.
Let's change it, bro.
You know what it is, maybe? We were always taught how to spell Mississippi, how much S's it has, how much I
And how long the word.
Are all professional sports rigged? Watch this video and let me know what you think.
I was like, listen, the closeout game is the hardest game in your life. And they be like, why? And I can't say. I can't say, but I'm like, listen, like, this is the hardest game you'll ever play in your life.
Shit, nah, I'll tell it. Like, go ahead. You gotta be the vehicle. The vehicle. You gotta be the vehicle.
No, it's real though.
No, I remember we were about to play Game 7, 2012. So we were about to play the Celtics or whatever.
Game 7.
So I'm hyped as hell. I'm like, yeah, bro, we got Game 7. Like, we about to bam. Like, it's gonna be lit. So Eldon's like, you know we gonna have to win by 15, just win by 1. So I'm like, what you mean? He's like, bro, it's NBA entertainment. Like, LeBron is in the Heat are waiting. Would you rather watch the Celtics or the Sixers play the Heat? I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm on the team. I wouldn't even watch the Sixers play the Heat type shit. Like, so we get in this game. You know how much money the NBA is gonna lose? Like this, you know, type shit. I'm like, I guess. Like, it's not honest. Like, would you watch that game next week? It was the Heat versus the Sixers. I'm like, nah. It's like, okay then. So like, that's why I'm telling you, M's and M's from this. I'm like, what? He's like millions of memories. This is entertainment. Damn, that's a bar.
This man was executed in 2015 after what he claimed was an April Fool's joke went wrong. Lin Senhao was a university student in Shanghai at a prestigious university, and he says that he decided to play an April Fool's prank on his roommate by spiking the drinking water in their room with drugs. He was an intern at a hospital lab and he had access to MDMA. He spiked the water dispenser in his room, leading his roommate to get poisoned. His roommate, Huan Yang, drank the water from the water dispenser on April 1st, and he immediately became poorly. He didn't die until the 16th of April. His organs failed and his body completely shut down. He'd actually told his father that the water tasted funny and he'd actually cleaned out the dispenser so that nobody else drank it. was the only one that drank the water, and his roommate said it was just a prank and it had gone wrong. Prosecutors argued that that couldn't be the case. He worked in a lab and he'd worked with this drug, using it on animals, so he knew exactly how much it would take to kill someone. The judge in court ruled that the act was malicious and he had intentionally poisoned his roommate, and he sent him to death. He had a 10-minute visit with his father before he was executed, in which he said sorry multiple times. He still professed his innocence and said that it was a prank gone wrong, and he was executed in November 2015.
Nobody in the entire world can visit this island. Okay, so majority of Americans don't know about the Forbidden Island in Hawaii. It's owned by one single family and nobody could visit. The island is called Niihau, and it's extremely different from anything else in the United States. There is only a population of 70 people, and they have no access to paved roads, telephone service, no running water, and the majority of the island lives off welfare checks from the US government. And with such harsh living conditions, it makes you wonder why anybody would even live on this island. And the real question is, if there's nothing to hide here, why can't anybody visit? Well, this rule that doesn't allow any outsiders onto the island was actually written into the agreement by the natives when they sold it to the Robinson family, all the way back in 1864. The Robinson family bought the island for $10,000 in gold, which is $325,000 today. And the crazy thing is that this family still owns the island. The Robinsons are also very focused on preserving the Hawaiian culture on this island that the natives did, so they go to church every Sunday, banned long hair for men, and kept the official Hawaiian language. But my whole opinion on this island is that if nobody can visit there and there's only 70 people on it, there's gotta be some crazy stuff going on there, right? There's just no way these 70 people are just completely normal living on this isolated island that nobody could visit. Let me know your thoughts on this, and also let me know if you've ever heard of this.
One fatal error meant this man was dragged by a roller coaster and thrown to his death. It was 2003 near Seattle, Washington. Doug McKay had been placed in charge of the family carnival business by his dad. Doug and his wife Sherry co-owned Paradis Amusements, which was based in Idaho. They ended up getting a contract with Whidbey Island Fair. On the 16th of August, the pair were at the fun fair inspecting the area. Doug noticed something needed fixing on one of the roller coasters. The question was called the Super Loop 2. The ride was basically a vertical loop. Now, Doug felt that it needed lubricating on one side of the loop. Tragically, like he had done many times before, Doug actually jumped onto the track while the roller coaster was in motion. Now, he was usually pretty good at this. He was very, very confident just hopping on and off the rides. However, as he sprayed oil onto the track this one day to lubricate the ride, he actually slipped and fell and got caught by his hair. He then became trapped on a carriage. Parkgoers watched on in horror as he was pulled 40 feet up to the top of the loop and then plunged to his death. Witnesses were then completely traumatized by seeing his body land on a metal fence and virtually split in half. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Horrifically, many children witnessed this as they were on the ride at the time. Now, the fair only postponed rides for an hour after the death. They then continued with the evening's amusements. The next day, the amusement park opened as usual. Doug's wife Sherry had promised Doug that if anything was to go wrong, she would keep the show running as usual.
This might be the craziest and most intense cartel encounter ever. What I'm about to show you is the U.S. Coast Guard raiding a high-speed submarine in the eastern Pacific Ocean, moving more than 17,000 pounds of cocaine. On June 18, 2019, a Coast Guard surveillance aircraft tracked the drug-filled narco sub hundreds of miles off the Colombian and Ecuadorian coastline, and the video shows a member of the Coast Guard riding on top of the speeding sub, pounding on the hatch and demanding it to come to a stop. The video then ended with the presumed trafficker emerging from the narco sub, putting his hands up in surrender. In total, 5 alleged smugglers were seized aboard the vessel. Now, just watch this video. It's absolutely insane, and it's something straight out of a video game.
Alto Tupaco! That's gonna be hard to get on! Alto Tupaco!
Multiple videos of this incident were going around social media yesterday, and honestly, I've not been able to stop thinking about it since. It's horrifying. Quick trigger warning for this one, because honestly, it's just awful. This is a still from one of the videos that I have watched. I wish I hadn't. I absolutely will not put it on here. I've blurred it out because it's just horrific. In this apartment block were a woman, her 2 children, and her mother-in-law. At some point yesterday morning, she had some sort of manic episode in which she stabbed her mother-in-law. She then grabbed her 3-year-old son, took him over to the window of the apartment block and dangled him outside the window. She held him outside the window by his arms. You can see that he's trying to climb back inside. I cannot imagine how terrified and confused he must have been. Authorities did act quickly and they put an inflatable cushion on the ground in order to catch him if she did drop him. But she saw this cushion and she moved around to the side of the apartment and dropped him out of this window. Police were trying to gain access to the apartment at this point, and they managed to do so just as she grabbed her child and tried to do the same thing to him. In the video, she is sick. Apparently, this was a manic episode. She's having some sort of mental health breakdown. In China, this sort of crime is usually met with the death sentence, but if she pleads insanity, she might not even get prison time. This has happened before in China. I didn't know about this case until I started researching the one that happened yesterday. But this is a couple who were having an affair, and this woman didn't want to raise someone else's children, so their father did the same thing to them. He dropped them off the balcony and they both passed away. They were 1 and 2. This couple have now been executed in January this year. I'm going to keep a close eye on this one because I'll be interested to see whether she does plead insanity or whether she gets sentenced to death.
This couple had triplets after losing all 3 of their children in a fatal car crash. The life of Lori and Chris Coble were forever changed after a horrific tragedy. Lori was driving down the California freeway heading home with her 3 children, 4-year-old Emma, 2-year-old Katie, and 5-year-old Kyle, when a big truck carrying 40,000 pounds while speeding crashed into the back of their minivan. The impact was devastating, and each Coble family member was transferred to separate hospitals. Then came the earth-shattering news. Chris Coble learned that all 3 of his children had passed away. Miraculously, Lori survived, though she had no memory of the fatal crash at all. Her husband had to tell her what happened and that their babies were gone. While Lori and Chris attempted to piece their lives back together with the support of their community, they felt a calling to ensure that Emma, Katie, and Kyle did not die in vain. Lori and Chris then felt another calling to try and have another child. The couple turned to IVF treatments, and just 6 months after the accident, Lori discovered she was pregnant. Almost exactly 9 months later, Lori gave birth to triplets, 2 girls and 1 boy, named Ashley, Ellie, and Jake. The triplets were conceived through in vitro fertilization and were born healthy. The Cobles believed that the birth of their triplets was a miracle and that their deceased children had a hand in crafting it. They have since started a foundation in memory of their children which provides scholarships to students who have lost siblings. This case is both horrific and absolutely mind-blowing. This couple lost 3 of their children, 2 girls and 1 boy, and then had triplets that were 2 girls and 1 boy. If this doesn't make you believe in miracles, I don't know what would. Rest in peace to Emma, Katie, and Kyle, who were taken from the world way too soon.
This couple were eaten alive by a grizzly bear, captured on harrowing video footage. In October 2003, Timothy Treadwell was a 46-year-old grizzly bear enthusiast. He famously claimed that he felt more at home in nature with the bear than normal human society. He spent a total of 13 summers in Alaska's Katmai National Park, documenting giant creatures. He would study people by how close he got to the giant. He said the animals understood him and that there was a mutual respect, and he would even the baby cubs. Park rangers, though, were warning Timothy about how unpredictable the animals could be. This was what Timothy lived for, though. He seemed very willing to take the huge risk of getting up close and personal with these beautiful bears. Now, Timothy began to get persistent. On one occasion, he even left food open inside of his tent. Ranger warned him not to do this. Now, in the autumn in question, he was actually with his girlfriend Amy at the park. Now, they usually only stay for summer, but this year they're there much later into October. Bears are known to be a little bit more anxious and antagonistic this time of year as they are preparing for hibernation and food supply are less. On the 5th of October, Timothy and his girlfriend were due to be picked up. They were getting a plane at a national park, but when the pilot turned up, they were nowhere found. Near the campsite, the pilot stumbled upon something terrifying. A human cage lay on the floor. Rangers were called and they were met by a terrifying bear. It tried to attack them, so they killed it. Human remains were later found in its stomach. They were the remains of Timothy and Amy. Timothy's camera later recovered from the campsite. The camera had captured the couple's brutal death. The audio from the camera was rolling, and it picked up Timothy screaming that he was being killed out here. Amy then shouts at him to play dead and then encourages him to fight back. Tragically, they were both eaten by the grizzly bear.
What you're about to see is the last video ever taken of 18-year-old Cameron Robbins, who disappeared after jumping off of a cruise ship.
Jump on! Oh my God! Oh! Oh! Bye-bye! Oh! That's it! Hey! Yo,
Cameron had just graduated from high school on May 21st of this year, and to celebrate, he and a bunch of his friends went on a cruise to the Bahamas. They were all aboard the Blackbeard Revenge cruise, which was put together by an independent company called Grad Week. On May 24th, at around 9:40 p.m., Cameron was dared to jump off of the cruise ship. The weather was reportedly bad that night. They were near the uninhabited island in Montagu Bay. After being dared, a group of students tried to physically stop. He jumped off the boat anyway. In the video, you can hear students screaming for him to grab the buoy, but he quickly drifted away. The ship's crew executed the man overboard protocol, and since then, the U.S. Coast Guard has